The Redwood Massacre is an 80s slasher-inspired, relentless killing fest.
The Redwood Massacre is full-on blood fest.
Heaps of blood and gore, heaps of horrible murders.
It's going to take you on a journey that's up, down, twists and turns. I mean, it's full-on blood and gore that just never stops.
It is one of the most violent films we've ever made, and probably the most violent film people are going to see this year.
The experience that I've had in the film, from beginning to end, has been wonderful. It truly has.
Because it's low budget, you have probably got a longer period of time you have to spend doing it, so the people involved have to be really committed to it. You can't just, it's not like 2 weeks of your life, it's not a month of your life. This went on for sort of 6 to 8 months or something like that. So everybody has to be really on board, and everybody has to muck in to get things done. So there's a really good camaraderie, everybody's totally committed to the project.
You know, I've worked on a few films and TV shows, but with this one in particular, you really got to be more involved with the process of what was going on, and that included everything from, you know, helping with lights, helping with camera, helping with the, you know, the sound, everything, and it really gave you an insight into the actual production and of how a film is actually made.
I've been working with Dave and Lorraine for quite a while now. We have a really good team ethic going. There was only 4 people in the crew because of the budget. So we all had to come up with ideas there and then about how to make things work. Everybody seems to work off each other really well.
Working with Dave and Lorraine was a great experience because it's a small team. You're seeing the same faces every weekend. There's a great atmosphere on set. Everybody's cold or wet or tired or covered in fake blood. But there's still a really good morale. Everybody's joking, everybody's upbeat. Dave really knows, he's sort of holding the whole film in his head, and he's giving you little bits and pieces to get you through the scene that you're doing, so you know that he's got a grip on everything that's going on.
I think that's the most frustrating thing for me, because he's like, it's always in my head. But for me to organise it as a producer, I need to get that out of his head and put it onto some kind of schedule to get the people into the right places. And I think that's what frustrates me more than anything about him.
And Lorraine is the person who's driving the whole production, you know, making sure everybody's getting where they're supposed to be, organising the locations. Lorraine's really the kind of the engine of the production.
Lorraine is someone who enjoys the process of making a movie from start to finish, the nuts and bolts, you know, all the stuff that people take for granted when shooting a film, like organising the actors, the locations, the blood effects. Not only was she producing the film, but she was also the main focus puller on the film. So a lot of the time, a lot of the pressure was on Lorraine, as it was her job to more or less keep people, the actors, in focus.
You really had a hands-on experience with the production. You know, you weren't afraid to ask any questions. You weren't afraid to say, you know, can I do it this way? Can I do it that way? They were really open, which is a good thing to be when it comes to, you know, producing a film, especially when it comes to a film of this nature, of low budget, because you want it to be good, you want it to be professional, and you want it to do well.
Working with the cast was a really lovely experience. Everybody was, you know, up for totally throwing themselves into it.
They're a really good laugh. Everyone seemed to get on well, everyone seemed to sort of ping off each other. And everybody came up with their own ideas at times, and maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. And I think it was really nice to have such a good, tight unit of people that were able to work together.
Everybody was there, they brought their game, and they were up for going the extra mile, you know, crawling through whatever it had to be, throwing themselves around with a smile on their face at the end of the day.
There was no sort of tension on set, you know. When you work on like soaps and whatnot, there's a timeline, you've got people watching you, and there's a certain amount of tension, and that wasn't there with this production. It was very kind of laid back. We genuinely had a laugh together, and I think, again, you can see that in the film.
And everybody got dragged through the ringer when it came to making their horror scenes, but they all did really well, and they all ended up smiling at the end of it. And I think that kind of shows the detriment of the kind of people that we work with.
We might have been a bit, I don't know, bit of a mixed sort of bunch of friends to come together, but I think it works. I think it works in the end, and I think in the end you're rooting for us.
As soon as we decided we were going to make a horror movie, we knew that having a good location was crucial, you know, to pull the film off. Because it is a horror film, if the locations don't really, you know, match up to what people normally expect while watching these kind of movies, we knew we'd be off to a non-start straight away.
Some of the locations that we had, the exterior locations are absolutely amazing. The interior locations, mainly the barns that we've shot in, they look amazing, and the settings are absolutely incredible, but as it stands, they're also covered in bird shit.
Working on location was, I would say, a mixed experience. Sometimes we were in places like Cairnmount, which is beautiful, absolutely stunning Scottish scenery. Other times we were at Donato Woods in the beautiful sunshine, and it was all warm and lovely. And then in the sort of latter half of the film, we spent all our weekends rolling around in shit in these barns.
There was 2 barns we used. One was ankle deep in pigeon poop and dead birds, and it smelled, it was disgusting. The actors were sitting in it, rolling about in it, they were thrown in it. It was pretty grim for everybody.
It's just some of the most horrible and disgusting locations you can imagine also turn out to be some of the best locations on film.
One of the actors was actually petrified of birds, and she did put up a bit of a fight, but you know what, she mustered on and she'd shot the scene, even though she was definitely not wanting to shoot the scene.
I have a phobia of birds, huge phobia, especially dead ones. I know it's crazy. Beforehand, I think Lorraine and Dave had to go in there and literally clear all the dead birds out of the barn. So what you're seeing in the film is real fear. Like, I am terrified because there is bird poop everywhere, feathers everywhere. It is just my worst nightmare.
I mean, they were great locations because they're so atmospheric, and it definitely helped to put you in the right frame of mind to be in some of these dilapidated barns and houses that we were in.
Because this was an independent film, a really low-budget film, a film we personally financed ourselves, we were kind of forced to go down the road of using practical effects. And I think in the long run, being forced to use the practical effects kind of benefited the movie, as it set the tone for the actors. We could visually see, you know, what was going to happen. We could see the effects, you know, as we were filming.
The reason that we had to do practical was purely the budget constraints that were on us. We don't have the money to do the huge amounts of visual effects, so we just went old school. We got the fake blood, we got sausages, we got chicken, we got mince, we had jelly, we had socks, we had tights, we had everything just put together to try and make this film look as gory as possible, but also look realistic.
We had enough budget to fund the blood and to fund jelly and to fund, you know, very cheap gore, but we couldn't afford prosthetics, we couldn't afford the wounds that we wanted. I couldn't afford a makeup artist to put the wounds on.
Everybody just wants to see the gore, they want to see the violence, and a lot of the times modern horror has kind of lost its way in terms of it just looks fake, whereas this one, I think part of the brutality and the violence of this film is down to the effects and the fact that when they're putting their hands into the bodies and stuff and pulling body parts out and stuff, you're just seeing these stringy, disgusting, horrible things, and it kind of works out better for the film that way.
The practical effects for the Redwood Massacre, for me, really involved being covered in fake blood a lot of the time. So I have fond memories of the start of the shoot where Pamela's really clean.
The gore in this film was a selling point. If we didn't get the gore in the film right, then the film, it would be completely pointless. If it wasn't realistic, if it wasn't gory and people believed that the gore was real, then the film was never going to get the target audience and people would lose faith in it pretty quickly.
Coming home, getting out of the costume, you know, my bathroom would be pink by the time I'd had a shower, and the costume in the washing machine, it looked like a bloodbath in the washing machine. So the clearing up was probably the hardest part of that.
But, you know, you just get on with it and just kind of try and just, you know, get into the scene and enjoy it as much as you can enjoy being murdered.
I really wanted this killer to be a complete throwback to the old 80s movies. I didn't even want to change much about it. I know it's not the most original of killers, But we felt that if we were going to do like a kind of 80s based film, the killer should represent the killers of that era also.
The way I would describe the Redwood Massacre killer is definitely he's molded on the ideas of 80s horror. So he's kind of like, he's a Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers kind of killer. He's stomps around, you run away, he walks and somehow still manages to keep up with you.
The Redwood Massacre killer is a big, mean, relentless killing machine. He doesn't give a shit about anybody or anything. All he wants to do is make people die in the most horrible way possible.
We wanted him to be brutal, we wanted him to be unstoppable, we wanted him to be frenzied, his attacks to be like, his anger and his rage to come across in his kills.
He's vicious and violent, and there's no way that you're going to be able to stop him. And he's driven by goals just purely of evil. He hasn't got a sort of an idea of what he wants to do. He's just pure evil, and he just wants to kill everybody and everything that comes in his way.
Ben is the loveliest, gentle giant you probably ever meet. And I remember when we filmed the scene where he has to beat me up. I've never met anyone who's so apologetic. He didn't, he just was so reluctant to be doing that to a lady.
He doesn't have any lines, he doesn't have anything to say. He can only express his anger and his hatred and his brutality through his movements. And so when he's chasing the characters down corridors, he can only do like through breathing and moving his shoulders, but he does it, and it's such a menacing character, and he does it perfectly.
But the actual actor who plays him, Ben, is the complete opposite to what a psychopathic killer would be. So it was actually quite interesting seeing Ben transform himself into the killer.
Once the mask is on, he's a completely different beast. Really a Jekyll and Hyde sort of situation.
The character that he brings, when he puts that mask on, he just becomes this something else. The way he moves, the way that he just comes across with that mask on, he just turns into the evil.
But he's like a big, huge, cuddly teddy bear. And then he would put on the mask and he would have the axe, and then he'd suddenly turn into this terrifying character that you believed with every fibre of your being was genuinely going to kill you.
When the mask comes off, he's the nicest, most polite man you'll ever meet, and everybody loves him. But just there's something really kind of sinister or lying underneath that nice persona that I think maybe Ben is a little bit evil.
Ben's also more or less a horror geek. He watches a lot of movies, so his performance is kind of based on films that he watched when he was a kid. So it was good for me because I didn't really have to direct him. I could rely on Ben to go away and kind of draw his own experience from watching those old 80s movies and, put that into his own character. And the fact that he loves horror movies so much definitely, helped his character and the way he acted, and it definitely shows when you watch it back on screen.